The rapture is not about fear, but about readiness and hope. This truth is often overshadowed by the way people discuss the end times. Many approach the subject with trembling, as though it were designed to terrify believers into submission. They focus on the images of sudden disappearance, chaos, and loss. Yet when we look closer at the heart of Scripture, we discover that the rapture is not given to strike terror into our souls, but to anchor us in the certainty of God's promises. It is not a dark cloud hovering over the horizon. It is the sunrise that points us toward hope. Fear is natural when we face the unknown. When a doctor gives an uncertain diagnosis, when the economy collapses, when war breaks out in the world, people naturally feel anxious. The human heart clings to what it understands, and when it cannot predict or control what is coming, it defaults to fear. But the promise of the rapture was never meant to paralyze the faithful. Instead, it is God's way of saying, I have not forgotten you, and I have prepared something better for you. Consider how a parent prepares a child for a journey. The parent does not describe the car ride or the flight in terms of danger or panic. They do not say, be terrified because this will shake everything you know. Instead, they say, get ready because we are going somewhere wonderful. That is the tone of the rapture when we see it through God's eyes. It is not a warning meant to fill our nights with nightmares. It is an invitation to prepare for a homecoming that will surpass our imagination. One of the reasons fear dominates conversations about the rapture is because people focus on what they will leave behind rather than what they are being called into. Think about a student graduating from high school. On one hand, they may feel sadness about leaving friends, classrooms, and a familiar routine. But on the other hand, graduation is a step toward greater opportunity, maturity, and freedom. The same principle applies to the rapture. To the world, it may look like loss, but for believers, it is the beginning of fulfillment. Hope replaces fear when we shift our gaze from what is temporary to what is eternal. In real life, hope is what allows people to endure hardships. A soldier far from home does not collapse under loneliness because he knows he will return to his family one day. A patient in recovery does not despair because the pain of healing carries the promise of health. In the same way, Christians live with the hope that the rapture is not a tragic interruption, but a glorious reunion. Hope transforms the conversation. Where fear says, what if everything ends? Hope says, what if everything begins? There is also a deeper reason why readiness is central to this truth. Readiness keeps us focused. When a runner trains for a marathon, they discipline their body not out of fear of failure, but out of hope for victory. When a bride prepares for her wedding day, she does not dread the moment, but anticipates it with joy. Readiness in the Christian life works the same way. It is not about living in constant paranoia, wondering if today is the day. It is about shaping each day with intentionality, knowing that when the moment does come, we will be found faithful. Jesus himself gave this perspective. In the Gospels, he taught parables about servants waiting for their master's return and bridesmaids keeping oil in their lamps. The message was clear: do not be afraid, but be prepared. Readiness is not about guessing the day or the hour. It is about living each day as if it matters. When we embrace that posture, the rapture shifts from being a shadow to being a light, from being a threat to being a promise. Metaphors help us see this even more clearly. Picture a lighthouse on a stormy coast. To sailors, the storm is frightening, but the lighthouse is not a cause for fear. It is a beacon of hope guiding them home. The rapture is that lighthouse. The world may be tossed by uncertainty, but believers can look toward the light and know that their destination is secure. Fear focuses on the storm. Hope fixes its eyes on the light. In everyday struggles, the same principle applies. When you face financial strain, relational heartbreak, or personal failure, the natural instinct is to worry and panic. But faith reminds us that we are not abandoned. Just as the rapture assures us of God's ultimate plan, hope in daily life assures us that His presence is constant. The connection is simple. If God has promised to carry us home at the end, then He will certainly sustain us in the present. That assurance removes fear and replaces it with readiness and trust. Many people today wrestle with the uncertainty of global events. News headlines talk about war, economic decline, climate disasters, and political unrest. For some, these are reasons to fear. But for the believer, these are reminders that the world is temporary, and that our ultimate hope is not in governments, economies, or human systems. It is in God's unchanging promise. The rapture becomes a symbol of that unshakable reality. Fear feeds on uncertainty, but hope thrives on promises. And God's promises never fail. There is a powerful quote that captures this beautifully. Fear looks at the future and trembles. Faith looks at the future and trusts. The rapture is the ultimate test of this truth. Will we tremble at the thought of the unknown, or will we trust the one who already knows the end from the beginning? Those who choose trust will not see the rapture as an interruption to life, but as the fulfillment of it. Readiness, then, is not about preparing out of dread, but about living in alignment with hope. It means forgiving quickly instead of holding grudges. It means serving others instead of being consumed by self. It means keeping faith alive instead of letting doubt dictate our choices. Every small act of readiness becomes a declaration of hope. Each day lived with purpose is like keeping oil in the lamp, ensuring the flame will be burning when the moment comes. The rapture is not meant to be the end of joy, but the beginning of it. It is not a reason to fear tomorrow, but a reason to live today with greater purpose. It reminds us that we are not bound to this world forever, that the struggles of now are temporary, and that what lies ahead is far greater than anything we could lose. This is why it is not about fear, it is about readiness and hope. Challenges may come, but rooted faith turns trials into testimonies. This is a truth that every believer must carry deep within their heart, because life is not designed to be free from difficulties. Storms arrive uninvited, losses shake us, disappointments wound us, and unanswered prayers test our patience. Some people think that faith is a guarantee against trouble, as if believing in God exempts us from pain. But the reality is different. Faith does not keep us from the fire, it sustains us in the fire. It does not silence the storm, it steadies us within it. Challenges are part of life, but they do not have to define the outcome of our story. Think of how a seed grows into a tree. When it is planted, it faces the crushing weight of soil above it. Darkness surrounds it and pressure pushes it down. If the seed had a voice, it might say, "This is the end." But what feels like burial is actually planting. Out of the darkness, roots begin to push deeper, searching for water and strength. Then in time, a shoot rises upward toward the light. The challenge of the soil is not destruction, it is the environment for transformation. The same is true for faith. Trials feel like burial, but they are planting grounds for testimonies. Consider the story of Joseph in the Bible. Betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused, and thrown into prison, his life seemed to unravel at every turn. Yet through each challenge, Joseph's faith did not collapse. It grew deeper. At the right time, the same man who was rejected became the one who rescued nations from famine. His trials became his testimony. Without the pit, the prison, and the betrayal, he could not have stepped into his calling. Joseph's story reminds us that God does not waste our struggles. What we endure in faith becomes the very foundation of what we testify later. In everyday life, this principle still holds true. Think of people who face serious illness. Some were told they might not survive, yet they emerged not only healed, but stronger in their trust in God. Their story inspires countless others who are fighting the same battle. Or consider someone who went through bankruptcy, lost everything, and felt humiliated, only to rise again with wisdom, resilience, and renewed purpose. That person's life becomes a living message to others that setbacks are not the end. These are not just success stories, they are testimonies born out of rooted faith. The key is being rooted. A tree with shallow roots may look strong on the surface, but when the storm hits, it topples. A tree with deep roots may sway, may lose branches, but it will remain standing. Faith works the same way. When our trust is shallow, built only on feelings or convenience, trials will knock us down. But when faith is rooted, anchored in God's promises, watered daily by prayer, and strengthened through obedience, it does not collapse when hardship comes. Instead, it transforms the hardship into a testimony that glorifies God. One of the most powerful ways challenges become testimonies is through the encouragement of others. Someone who has walked through grief and found peace can speak to another grieving heart in ways no one else can. Someone who overcame addiction can give hope to another person still struggling. Someone who endured rejection but discovered God's acceptance can remind others of their worth. This ripple effect is the beauty of testimonies. They turn personal pain into collective hope. There is a quote that says, "The strongest trees are not found in sheltered valleys, but on the mountaintops where the winds are strongest." This is not just poetic, it is true spiritually. Easy seasons don't shape our character. It is the seasons of difficulty that carve strength, endurance, and depth into our lives. We may not see it in the moment, but later when we look back, we realize the trial was not wasted. It became proof of God's sustaining power, a story we could share to lift others. Even in Scripture, we are reminded over and over that trials refine us like gold in fire. Gold is valuable, but its impurities must be burned away. The heat of challenges feels uncomfortable, but it purifies faith. When we emerge, we carry a testimony that is not fragile or shallow, but resilient and trustworthy. This is why James writes, "Count it all joy when you fall into various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces patience." Trials do not diminish faith, they perfect it. In practical terms, this means that the next time you face a hardship, instead of asking, "Why me?" you can begin to ask, "What is God building in me through this?" That simple shift turns suffering into growth. It takes the sting of fear and replaces it with the seed of purpose. You may not see the testimony immediately, but every step taken in faith brings you closer to it. When people share their testimonies, they rarely say, "Everything was easy and I never faced trouble." Instead, they say, "I walked through the valley, but God carried me through. I thought it was the end, but God showed me a new beginning. I was weak, but His strength lifted me." These are the testimonies that inspire others because they remind us that faith is not about escaping the storm, it is about enduring it with hope. Challenges are inevitable, but they do not come to bury us. With rooted faith, they become the soil from which something greater grows. Every trial is an opportunity to witness God's power. Every setback a stage for His redemption, and every tear a seed that will one day bloom into joy. Rooted faith turns the hardest chapters into the most powerful testimonies, and those testimonies echo beyond our own lives, bringing courage, strength, and light to those still walking through their storms. Christians are called not to fear the future, but to shine as light within it. The future has always been uncertain. Every generation has faced wars, diseases, natural disasters, and cultural shifts that made people worry about what tomorrow might bring. Today is no different. Headlines scream about economic collapse, political division, and global unrest. Yet for those rooted in Christ, the call is not to tremble in the shadows of uncertainty, but to rise and shine with the light of faith, love, and hope. Fear has a way of shrinking our vision. It makes us look inward, focusing only on self-preservation. It tells us to hide, to withdraw, to brace for impact. But faith expands our vision. It compels us to look outward, to see opportunities even in darkness, and to bring comfort to others when they are afraid. This is why Jesus called His followers the light of the world. Light is not meant to stay hidden under a basket. Light exists to pierce darkness, to guide, to bring warmth, and to reveal the path forward. Consider the example of the early Christians. They lived in a world far more hostile than ours, persecuted, misunderstood, and often hunted for their beliefs. Yet instead of cowering in fear, they built communities of generosity and hope. When plagues swept through cities, many abandoned the sick, but Christians stayed and cared for them, even at great risk. Their light shone so brightly that it drew countless hearts to faith. They did not fear the future because they trusted the one who held it, and their courage became a testimony that still inspires us today. The same principle applies to us now. The world is searching for stability, for voices that bring peace instead of panic. In every workplace, neighborhood, and family, there are people weighed down by fear of what is coming. This is where believers are called to step in, not with arrogance or judgment, but with compassion, strength, and hope. When we choose to shine, even small acts, a word of encouragement, a helping hand, a prayer for someone in need, become beams of light cutting through the darkness. There is a metaphor that helps capture this. Imagine a lighthouse standing against crashing waves. The storm may be fierce, but the lighthouse does not panic. It simply does what it was built to do, shine. And in doing so, it saves lives. Christians are called to be like that lighthouse. We cannot stop the storms, but we can guide others safely through them by being steady, by holding to truth, and by living with joy that does not depend on circumstances. The future may bring challenges we cannot predict, but what matters most is not the size of the storm, it is the source of our light. Fear will always whisper, hide away. Faith will always answer, shine brighter. And when we choose to shine, we become living proof that God's promises are stronger than any uncertainty the future may hold. The world does not need more fear, it needs more light. And you were created to be that light, carrying hope into tomorrow, no matter what it brings. There are moments in life when dreams feel so vivid, so real, that they leave us shaken long after we wake. Sometimes they are nothing more than the echoes of our imagination. But there are other times when they seem to carry a deeper weight, a spiritual urgency, as though heaven itself is giving us a glimpse beyond the veil. I want to share with you a message born out of such a dream, a vision of the rapture, what it means for us, and how we are called to live in light of it. When I saw it, there was no chaos, no fear, only a sudden shift, like the blink of an eye, where everything familiar was changed. It was as if the world was caught between silence and thunder. In that moment, the dream made me realize that the rapture is not just an event in the future, it is a call to readiness in the present. Too often, people think of such moments with anxiety, as though God's plans are meant to terrify us. But the truth is, these glimpses are not about fear. They are about preparation, hope, and purpose. Think of a traveler who knows their flight is leaving at a set time. They do not waste the final hours in panic. They use them wisely, packing what matters, discarding what does not. The dream reminded me that we too are travelers. The rapture is not a threat to those who believe. It is an invitation to live ready, to make sure our hearts are not weighed down by distractions, bitterness, or endless pursuits that cannot follow us into eternity. Readiness is not about paranoia. It is about living intentionally. Another part of the dream showed faces, ordinary people, some radiant with peace, others frozen in shock. And the difference was not about who had lived perfect lives, but about who had placed their trust in God. It is easy to assume that strength comes from status, wealth, or intelligence, but in that moment, none of those things mattered. What mattered was faith. What mattered was where the roots of each heart had been planted. Just as a tree stands firm in storms only if its roots go deep, so it will be when the winds of eternity blow. In real life, we see the same lesson. When tragedy strikes, a natural disaster, a sudden loss, a global crisis, some collapse under fear while others, though shaken, stand unbroken. The difference is not that one group avoided hardship, but that they had built their lives on something stronger than circumstances. The dream reminded me that the rapture will be no different. It is not about predicting the exact moment, but about preparing the foundation of our hearts long before it comes. There is a quote that says, "The best way to predict the future is to prepare for it." Spiritually, preparation is not about knowing the date. It is about knowing the one who holds the date. It is about choosing faith daily, forgiving quickly, loving deeply, and walking in hope. These small choices are like oil in a lamp. They keep the flame alive so that when the night grows darkest, the light does not go out. The dream ended not in fear, but in peace. It was as though heaven was whispering, "Do not be afraid. This is not the end of hope. It is the fulfillment of it." And that is the truth every believer needs to hold close. The rapture is not about escape, it is about homecoming. It is not about losing the world we know, but about stepping into the fullness of the world we were created for. So take heart, do not live weighed down by fear of the unknown. Instead, live lifted by the certainty of God's promises. Whether the day comes soon or late, the call is the same. Be ready, live with purpose, and let your life be a testimony of hope. For when that moment arrives, it will not be terror for those who believe. It will be the greatest awakening the soul has ever known.